The chandeliers above spilled a warm golden glow, glittering over crystal glasses and polished silver. On stage, my father navy suit sharp as a blade, silver tie perfectly knotted, stood beside my mother in a deep emerald silk gown. Together they held the Integrity Award high, their smiles flawless under the lights, as applause rolled through the ballroom. I sat at table 7, surrounded by soft chatter, my hand resting lightly on a half-full glass of water, a faint buzz from my jacket pocket. One email. Subject line, urgent, loan account in your name. I tapped it open. The number hit me first, $10,000,000, and a signature that looked exactly like mine. My breathing stayed steady, my face unchanged. But inside, a wire had just been pulled taut, and I knew in 30 minutes everyone in this room would learn the truth they'd been hiding for the last 6 months. My name is Daniel Tran. I'm 30 years old. I write code for a living, the kind of quiet, unglamorous work that keeps other people's systems from collapsing. It's clean, honest, predictable. I like it that way. My parents, they built Tran Realty Group from a single downtown office into a statewide real estate empire. Their names are in glossy magazines, their faces in annual reports. In family photos, I'm the one off to the side, not because I was unwanted, but because I stayed away. That was by choice. 5 years ago, I saved the company from a major client data breach. They credited the entire fix to the IT department. No mention of me, not even a thank you at dinner. That was when I realized, in this family, appearances matter more than truth, so we've kept it polite. Close enough for holiday invitations, distant enough to avoid the arguments about why I don't think like an entrepreneur. But I've always known how their world works, the handshakes, the curated smiles, the belief that if the surface shines bright enough, no one will look underneath. Tonight was their night, the company's anniversary, a fundraising gala under the eyes of the state's most influential people. And here I was, with proof that the foundation they were standing on wasn't theirs to stand on at all. The sender's name sat at the top of the screen like a cold weight, Martin Keller, branch director at the bank where I opened my very first checking account, a man I hadn't spoken to in years. The message was short, precise. As requested, here is confirmation of the loan approval, documents attached. I tapped the first PDF. My name in bold, my address, my social security number, and below it, a debt figure that seemed to pull the air out of my lungs, $10,000,000. The signature at the bottom, it could have been mine if you squinted. Same curve in the D, same clipped N at the end. But it wasn't. A note in the margin read, "Emergency liquidity line for Tran Realty Group. Funds to be released within 24 hours. I knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't just paper. It was a fuse. And if it burned all the way down, the first person it would blow apart was me. Beneath the first file sat a second attachment, a scanned court filing, time-stamped 3 hours earlier. They had already moved the loan agreement into the legal record as collateral for a disputed property deal. That meant I wasn't just a name on a loan. I was now legally tied to whatever mess they were trying to bury. 3 numbers locked into my head like coordinates. 24 hours, that's when the bank would release the funds. 3 hours, that's when the court clerk would stamp the property transfer, making the loan untouchable. 30 minutes, the time left before the gala reached the legacy video, the one moment I knew every single eye in this room would be fixed on the giant screen. That might be my only shot. From where I sat, I could see the stage program in neat gold lettering. After my parents' speech, there'd be applause, then the video, a glossy montage of company history, run directly from a laptop backstage. I could almost hear my father's voice in my head. "It's family, he won't fight us." I'd seen this pattern before. Years ago, they'd signed my name to a vendor contract to hide a budget gap, a small one that time. I let it slide. I told myself it was just helping out. Tonight, the gap was $10 million, and if I stayed silent, my name would be the one on every legal trail, while theirs stayed polished for the cameras. Somewhere inside me, the decision had already been made. The applause was still rolling across the ballroom, but my mind was already somewhere else. I slid my phone into my jacket and reached for the leather messenger bag at my feet. Most people here had clutches or cufflinks. I brought work. The zipper's quiet rasp felt louder than it should have. Inside, my laptop. In under a minute, I'd pulled the files from my phone. The loan agreement, the court filing, and one more thing I hadn't mentioned to anyone, an audio file. It was short, maybe 20 seconds. My father's voice clipped and certain. Just use Daniel's file, he won't know until it's done. Then my mother, smooth but cold. It's family, he won't fight us. I renamed the folder something harmless. Legacy Final Cut approved. Then I closed the lid, took one slow breath, and stood. The security rope at the side corridor led to the Backstage tech booth. The guard barely glanced at me when I said, "Corporate just sent an updated file for the Montage." He waved me through without a second question. From behind the curtain, I could see the last seconds of my father's speech. His hands rested on the podium like a man in complete control. The irony was almost sharp enough to taste. His applause broke like a wave, then faded into a hush as the lights dimmed. From Backstage, I heard the faint click of the laptop trackpad. The company logo flared onto the massive LED screen. For one heartbeat, it looked exactly as planned. Then the first slide. Not the sepia-toned photo of Tran Realty's first office. Not the smiling employee portraits that marketing had polished to a sheen. A high-resolution scan of the loan agreement. My name at the top, $10 million in bold figures. The ripple in the room was immediate, a chair leg scraping against the marble, a glass clinking against a plate. Before the murmur could rise, the next image appeared. The court filing, time-stamped, my name listed as primary obligor. And then the audio. My father's voice, steady, confident. "Just use Daniel's file, he won't know until it's done." My mother's voice following without hesitation. "It's family, he won't fight us." In the dark, heads turned toward the stage. The cameras that had been aimed at the screen began to swing back toward my parents. For the first time that evening, their smiles didn't move. No one moved at first. The only sound was the faint hum of the LED screen. Then, at the front table, a state senator set his champagne flute down without taking a sip. 2 seats over, a major donor leaned toward his wife and whispered something sharp enough to make her eyes widen. The camera crews had stopped filming the screen. Their lenses swung to the stage, catching the tightness in my father's jaw, the way my mother's fingers locked around the base of the award as if it could anchor her. Somewhere in the middle rows, a voice muttered, "Is this part of the program?" Another voice, lower, faster, answered, "No." Even the band in the corner, hired to play the walk-off music, stayed frozen with instruments in hand. And then movement from the far left row. A man in a gray suit rose slowly. Martin Keller. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried. That signature is not his. The silence that followed was heavier than applause could ever be, and in it I stepped forward. From the side aisle, my footsteps sounded louder than they should have on the polished floor. The nearest camera swung toward me, its red tally light burning like a spotlight. I didn't look at it, I looked at them. If this, I motioned toward the frozen frame of the loan agreement, is what integrity looks like, then maybe everyone here deserves to know who's really paying for it. My father opened his mouth, I kept going. That loan isn't mine. The court filing isn't mine. But if I stayed silent, every legal trail would lead straight to me. That was the plan, wasn't it? I let the question hang, not because I wanted an answer, but because I wanted the room to see their silence. Then I turned to the audience. These files and the recording you just heard are already with my attorney and with the State Financial Crimes Unit. The bank will not be releasing those funds. The murmur started low, then built, like a current shifting direction. And for the first time in years, my parents weren't the ones steering the room. The first to stand was the governor's chief of staff. He didn't look at my parents. He didn't look at me. He just tapped his phone, leaned toward the governor, and within seconds, the entire head table was gathering their coats. 2 major donors followed, murmuring polite excuses as they slipped toward the exit. The cameras tracked them, hungry for the shot. At the media table, a reporter from Channel 6 spoke into her phone, her voice crisp. Breaking from the Tran Realty Gala, alleged fraudulent loan exposed live. My father took a step toward the podium, hand half raised, but the sound tech had already cut the feed. My mother's smile was gone, replaced by a fixed stare somewhere above the crowd. Near the back, Martin Keller spoke briefly to 2 men in dark suits, state financial investigators, apparently not here for the dinner after all. One of them glanced at me, gave the smallest nod, and followed Keller out. The ballroom didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The shift in the air was enough. People were already avoiding my parents' table, and no one was looking away from me. By morning, the clip was everywhere, replayed on local news, clipped for social media, dissected in online forums. Headlines didn't pull punches. Fraud exposed live at Tran Realty Gala. CEO, PR director implicated by own son. Tran Realty's stock slid 18% before the market even closed. 3 major investors froze their contributions to the ongoing luxury projects. The State Financial Crimes Unit issued a statement by noon. Assets under review, pending investigation. 3 corporate accounts, including the emergency liquidity line, were frozen. My inbox lit up. Reporters, old colleagues, people I'd never met, thanking me for not letting it slide. And one call I didn't expect, a consortium of small investors. "We're done with Tran Realty," the voice said. "But if you're starting something of your own, we'd like to talk." From my parents, nothing. No calls, no messages, no attempt at damage control. I didn't return their calls, not that they made any. Instead, I met the investors in a quiet downtown cafe, the kind of place where no one cares about last names or legacy. By the end of the week, we'd sign the papers. Not for a real estate venture, for a tech firm. My firm. A company built on clean code, clean books, and the one thing my parents only ever pretended to value, integrity. The last I saw of them was in a news clip, walking into the courthouse with their attorneys, faces set like stone. The award they held on that stage, now just a photograph in yesterday's paper, blurred at the edges. They built a stage to talk about integrity. I used it to show the truth. And the best part, I didn't just walk away from their world. I walked straight into my own.